Welcome to the G-Spot.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello everybody, welcome to Dynamic GT League's G-Spot, otherwise known as the Dgt-G-Spot, where usually I would have Ray with me and we'd have a chat about loads of stuff that happens in races, but yeah, Ray's not here, so I'm all on my own. It's quite lonely in the commentary box when you're all on your own. Although, to be fair, I could have asked people to join me on this, but to be honest, I decided not to because I've got a lot of things that I needed to catch up on. So the timing to be able to record what I'm going to be showing would not have been easy to sort out. So I figured maybe the best thing to do is just get through these as fast as I can. It turns out that basically we're going to have the G10 video, G11 video, G12 video and G13 video. So there's going to be 4 G-Spot videos. They're going to be coming out in quick succession, and that's to sort of help catch up to what we'd been missing over the last few weeks. So yeah, as I mentioned, Ray's not here. Hopefully his house move has gone well, and hopefully we'll see him back on the racetrack on Thursday. Okay, so for anyone that doesn't know what the Dgt-G-Spot is, it is where within the Dynamic GT League we're able to take a second look, and a third and fourth and fifth and sixth if we want, at things that happen in races, whether it be funny things, random things, crashes, spins, overtakes, basically anything that crops up and anything that any of the viewers would like us to perhaps explain or look into. Feel free to comment it. I mean, if you happen to see something that happens on a race video and you'd like us to have a little bit more of a look into it, feel free to ask. We can always see what we can do. Also, if reports are put in by drivers because someone's crashed into them or there's been unsafe return to track or whatever it may be, the G-Spot gives us the opportunity, if we feel the need for speed, if we feel the need to be able to show why a penalty is given or why a penalty is not given, or even be able to just educate everybody by showing what has happened. What me and Ray will always say though is when we're doing the G-Spot and we're recording it, we are just doing it as a bit of fun as commentators. So don't take anything we say too seriously. But at the same time, when it comes to stuff that's been reported, like if I do state, or me or Ray states that this was the report, this was the steward's view, then obviously that's the view of the stewards, and we'll try and explain why that view was taken. Okay, waffled on a little bit already, so you'd think without Ray being here I wouldn't talk as much, but actually you'll probably find I talk twice as much. Okay, I mentioned that there's going to be 4 G-Spot videos coming out. This first one is mainly going to be for stuff that has happened at Suzuka. The second one will mainly be things that have happened at Fuji, I think. Then the next one, I believe, is... I can't remember. Let's see, Suzuka, Fuji. There's some clarifications that were wanted, and then I think there's the last one is going to be showing some overtakes, some water moves. So let's get cracking with this one. So G10, we'll take a quick look at what we're going to be looking into. So G1, race 2. Hey, get off the line. I don't know why I sounded like Christopher Walken then, but there you go. So this was Suzuka's start. Hey gets a little bit sideways, tags the back of Gary, and nearly puts him in a spin. Now this was something that Hay had brought to our attention. It's interesting to look at here because Hay hasn't really done anything wrong. He's just massively unlucky. He's got a better start than Gary. He's gone to take evasive, but interestingly Gary hasn't got traction control on. So Gary's sort of first and second phase of the start is not as quick as Hay's. So if we watch from Hay again, you'll see the tyre smoke come from Gary just there. That's a little bit of wheel spin. Hay takes evasive, and unfortunately it results in a little tank slapper. Puts him into the side of Gary. And not really much in that. So, yeah. Not a lot really to... Not a lot else to explain into that one. I think it was quite self-explanatory. But I would recommend Gary in these cars. Don't be afraid of using the traction control at the start. Most people will. It's safer and quicker because, as we saw there, Hay did have traction control on and still managed to get the car sideways. So it can still be done when there's too much throttle with too much steering applied. So that's the first one down. Let's move on to the next one then. So G2 Race 2 Rich, who spun me this time? Well, he's asked that a few times recently, hasn't he? So Suzuka into the final chicane. He's got Jimmy ahead of him. Hay coming up behind, not really there. And around Rich goes and gets a little bit of a nudge from Hay. Now, Hay did ask for this to be looked at the G-Spot. And to be fair, it wasn't like he'd reported it or anything. Rich got massively unlucky. It's the curb that spun him. Once again, too much throttle as he gets on that curb. I don't think Rich would have even known that Hay had a little bit of contact with him just there. But yeah, at least it could have been a lot worse for Rich. Like this. I mean, if Hay wondered whether he was at fault for Rich's first spin, I think he definitely should be questioning whether he's at fault for this spin. Or perhaps this spin. Oh, nearly. Is he going to go again? Is he going to go? No, I thought he might even go to the pits. But that's one there where, to be fair, I think Hay brought it to our attention. Perhaps he didn't know if he was at fault for spinning Rich around, because there was definitely contact between Hay and Rich. But in that situation, I think, to be honest, there's not a lot Hay could have done, and I don't think there's a lot Rich could have done either. Rich has lost it on the curb, massively unfortunate. Hay's come around the corner, and there isn't really a lot he could do or anywhere he could go. Yes, there was contact, which has helped Rich in his rotation, I would say, but Hay is not at fault for Rich being spun there or for that spin on him. So that's a situation where, yeah, there's contact, but let's say, for example, and Rich won't know anything about this, but had Rich reported it saying, Hay spun me, obviously the response there, I reckon, would be, well, yeah, he's hit you, but you'd already spun it on the curb and you were spinning, and there wasn't a lot Hay could do. And that's the way it is sometimes. Not every... hang on, let me get this right. There isn't always someone to blame in an accident. That's why it's called an accident. Okay, so a couple of really easy ones to go through there. I doubt it's going to be this easy all the way through. But what I will say, Rich, yeah, you seem to do donuts nicely in this car. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So G3 from race 2, get wide with a little help from my friends. Now this was another one that Hay mentioned. Down into turn 1 and the third lap, SRI having a bit of a look up the inside, and in comes Jimmy, tags the back of Hay, and out wide Hay it goes, and then it could look like Jimmy's sort of gone for Hay there, but I mean, when I first viewed it from the spectator view, I did wonder what had happened there, because it did kind of look like Jimmy sort of went for the second contact, and I think I might know what has happened here. I'm going to try and explain it. I could be wrong. Jimmy got his braking a bit wrong, tags the back of Hay, gets Hay out of shape. He's then gone to tag the back of Hay, I think, to give him a boost to get him going again, which is something that we have seen. I've done it. I know Hay has done it himself. And I've seen plenty of people do it. And it's something actually I think me and Ray talked about a while ago. Where, yeah, sometimes if you've made a bit of an error and cost someone a bit of time, giving them a bit of a bump draft and a boost isn't a bad thing to do, because it just helps soften the pain a little bit. So I think in this one, it was a case that Jimmy unfortunately got his brake in a little late. Now, it's one of those situations where let's see. Had Jimmy had no cars in front of him, his braking point would have been fine, but he did have 2 cars side by side. And both of those cars are being cautious, trying to make sure they don't hit each other, and Jimmy's just been caught out a little bit by that. And with how fast that happens, it's not like Jimmy could have reacted and done anything to avoid hitting the back of Hay there. I don't think he could have taken evasive. It happens so fast. I mean, you're doing 180 mile an hour at that point. You cover a lot of ground at 180 mile an hour. So yeah, I mean, that's one of those where, had Jimmy not been able to wait for Hay, or if it had carried on, it could have potentially been a penalty towards Jimmy, because he would have had to make sure he's more cautious of what's happening with the cars in front, because I mean, that's the way it is. You have to be aware that cars ahead may brake at different points to you. Obviously though, if someone's braking at 300 meters when the braking point is at 100 meters, that brings it into a whole different scenario. That's a whole different conversation. But with this one, yeah, I think Jimmy just unfortunately got caught out, tagged the back of Hay. I think he's then gone to try and give him a boost, and unfortunately, instead of helping Hay, it's kind of made things a bit worse, and then Jimmy has spun. So unfortunately that one, and I think, to be fair, I think if that had been reported, I don't think a penalty would have been given on that one. I mean, I could be wrong. It'd be interesting to see what the other admins think. But I guess the way I would look at it is, I see it as Jimmy's made a mistake. He's tried to rectify it. It hasn't worked, and then he's ended up spinning. Hay hasn't, and Hay's been able to continue on. I'd say Jimmy's spin, that's his penalty in that one. So there we go. Right, we'll move on to the next one. And this is an interesting one. G4 from race 2. Gary causing a crash by evading a crash. Now, before I go on to looking at the footage here, I want to be able to quote the report and the steward's view on this one before we go into the footage. I thought this might be a better way to try and do things. So this was something that was reported. So this has been looked at by the stewards, and a decision has been made, and a penalty was given. And we said at the steward's report from Suzuka that we would look at this on the G-Spot. Unfortunately, it's taken till now for me to be able to do it. Excuse me, I'm going to burp. Now, so let's have a look. So Dave the Harp, it was that reported this, and I will say, sometimes people think that it's a bit, you're grassing if you're reporting. Not at all. And I would always like to try and stick up for people that do put reports in, because it's not to dig at people or to get at people. It's to help educate people to things that they may not have realised has happened. Now, this is one where I haven't spoken to Gary about it, so I don't know exactly what his view was of it at the time. I don't know if he's aware of it, what happened or not. But I will go through what the report was, what the steward's view was, and what the steward's verdict was. So here we go. So the report was that Gary never waited for me after taking me off on lap 6 at the last corner. So the steward's view is that Gary goes off at Spoon Curve and loses places to Jason and Steve F1 after rejoining. Dave the Harp then draws alongside Gary on the left before the chicane, which is the final corner. Gary brakes too late and swerves left to try and avoid Steve F1, which pushes Dave off the track and costs him many places. Gary also rear-ends Steve into Jason, but both drivers stay on track without being compromised. Now, the steward's verdict from this is it's fair to say that Gary may have slightly missed his braking point. Gary tried to do the right thing in taking evasive of the cars in front, but probably didn't realise Dave was to his left. Also, because he hit Steve at the same time as Dave, he may not have realised that he pushed Dave off track. So a stage 2 penalty applies, which is -3 points to be deducted from Gary's championship total. Okay, so if we now get ready to go and have a look into the footage then. Let's get my video ready so I can see it. Be there in a moment. Okay, so looking then at Gary going into Spoon, he's got quite worn tyres and he runs a little bit wide. I think we saw this on the commentary at the time. We talked about him getting a bit of understeer, nearly spins it, getting back on the track. He's done really well to save it, and he's done well to avoid Jason and Steve F1 here. Tucks into their slipstream, but David Harp, SRI and Hay have got a brilliant run on the back of Gary here. David Harp really closing in now fastly, very fast. And this is where we don't see what happens. We just see Dave go in a different direction. So at the time of watching the footage, we didn't really see what had happened here. So as we look from Gary, you don't really see a lot here. Dave just coming up alongside, but then very late on the brakes, and he is moving to the left to avoid the back of Steve, but does put Dave off the track. If we look at this view to show Dave how close he is, but also Dave, does he disappear? No, he doesn't, but it could look like Dave was behind Gary, so that's something that we'll look at because we know that the mirror is not great. Look, so as we play this forward, this is just before Gary hits Steve F1. He's taking evasive to the left. If you looked at the mirror, you could think that Dave is behind. However, Dave is not behind. There is enough of an overlap there that unfortunately when Gary moves across, it does put David Harp off the track. So this is where Dave is closing rapidly. There's no question he's within fair range. He's up the outside. Gary takes that evasive, and it's only a small touch, but it's clearly enough to put Dave the Harp off the track, nearly into the head-on wall, and lost a lot of places. Now, like I said, we didn't know whether Gary was aware that he'd put Dave off there. I think had he known, I think he would have waited, personally. But also, I can. It's one of those where looking at it from a steward's perspective, you can see that he's braked late and he's gone to take evasive. And to be honest, if you're going to take evasive into that final chicane at Suzuka, you don't really want to be taking evasive to the right, because if you do that, cars are going to be coming around the right hand corner in front of you. Chances are you might hit one. So taking evasive to the left is the right thing to try and do. Unfortunately for Gary though, Dave was there, and he was there fairly. That's why Gary got a -3 point penalty on that one. Okay, so if we move on to the next one then, so G5 from race 2. I hope you're not claustrophobic because it's going to get tight in here. And again, this is one that involves Gary. I'm just going to not show the footage just yet because this was another report. And again, as I say, it's not that anyone is picking on Gary. It's a couple of things happening in a race. I can fully understand why Dave the Harp reported the one that we've just seen, and I can also understand why this next one was reported. Now, no penalty was given, I can tell you that now, which meant that we could easily have just ignored it on the G-Spot, but I wanted to show it because there are a few key points within this incident. Okay, so in a second I will read through what the actual report was and what the view of the stewards and the verdict of the stewards is. Okay, so let's see. So 24:40, Gary pushes me off at the final corner. Sounds similar to the other one, but actually it's very different. Okay, so the steward's view. Gary moves alongside SRI on the left into the chicane. Both cars go side by side through the chicane, making minor contact, and SRI then goes off the track on the exit. The steward's verdict is that Gary moved alongside SRI fairly and left enough space in the middle of the chicane. The stewards believe the contact was caused by SRI turning into Gary. On the exit, Gary just about left the car's width on his right, including the exit curb, and therefore the stewards don't believe Gary was to blame for SRI ending up off track, so it's deemed as a racing incident with no further action. Now, we've said before that when it comes to the stewards' reports, we like to try and sort of put things in as few words as possible, but there could be a lot more information that has been looked at, considering all those kind of things. So this is where I'm going to be able to give a much more in-depth look into this one, because it would be very easy for someone to to take a sentence here literally, which was Gary just about left the car width on his right, including the exit curb, and therefore the stewards don't believe Gary was to blame for SRI ending up off track. Now, there are a number of additional key points into that sentence, and that's what we're going to have a look at. So as we play the footage here then, so SRI is alongside SGP, Gary's moving up the inside, everything's fine here, a little bit of contact but no harm, no foul. Going into the final chicane, side by side, from this view, can't really see a lot. And then it does look like Gary sort of pushes SRI a little bit wide, and I think we may have seen that on the footage, but as we see here, SRI gets a little wobbly on the curb and yeah, is definitely off the track. If we look from Gary, we can see that he pulls alongside, there's that contact, but there's nothing in there. Everything's fine in the braking zone, Gary's giving plenty of room, turning in for the corner. Doesn't go all the way out to the edge of the track, so let's have a look from SRI. SRI gets a little bit of a boost from Jimmy. SRI tucking in behind SGP, which rightly, but you may notice that SRI's car had a bit of a wobble over the curb. So if we look at it from Gary's view, I'm not sure if it's this one that I do it slow motion or not. No, it's not. I'll do it in slow motion in a sec, because we see that wobble again. So here we go, slow motion. So Gary's giving SRI plenty of space. SRI is trying to give Gary plenty of space. Okay. SRI is going to get on the curb a little bit like we saw Rich do earlier, but SRI is a lot more on the curb. And what's going to happen is his car's going to bounce back onto the road, and a bit like we saw with Rich on a previous G-Spot, his car's bounced, had a wobble, now it's gripped up, but the front is now going to spear to the left, which is the car bouncing and trying to rectify itself. So this is where SRI's car has turned into Gary. So the initial contact is SRI's car hitting Gary. Also, Gary is already beginning to turn left. So he's attempting to go to the left, not the right. The cars separate a little bit. SRI still recovering from the wobble, goes to turn in again, and then there is a secondary contact. Now, this again is where the stewards felt that it's SRI's car that has moved to Gary's car, not the other way round. And as it plays on a little bit here, as we get closer to the exit curb, we can see that Gary is attempting to leave SRI some space. And regarding the conversation we had about the exit curb, one of the things I said was, when I go through this corner, I tend to have two wheels all over this exit curb, a bit like SGP has ahead. So has Gary left the car's width? He's trying his best to. So this is one where for the different stages of the incident, the actual contact between the two cars we felt was SRI's car making contact with Gary's car, not the other way round. Excuse me. And Gary is still attempting to give SRI space on the exit of the corner. Now, before you start asking loads of questions, there are a few more things I can still mention as well. Okay, so as Gary and Ray were sort of in the middle of the two chicanes before the first bit of contact, Gary, as I mentioned, is already straightened his wheel and getting ready to turn left. So this was one of those situations where Gary is not making any attempt, and neither is his car, to move to the right. And there may have been a similar situation some time ago in Nürburgring with SRI, and I think it was Dave the Harp. And one of the key factors in that particular incident was, in a similar sort of situation, Dave the Harp's tyres were pointing away from the apex of the corner. So to put it into perspective, if Dave the Harp was Gary in this situation, his front wheels were aiming way right when there's a left-hand corner coming up. So the positioning of the car and the direction the car was going, not quite natural at that point. So this is where, again, incidents can differ drastically. So in this scenario, Gary's got his steering straight, he's actually starting to steer left. And some may say, well, he hasn't made the apex of the second corner. Well, one of the views that those stewards had was that quite often when you get a little minor contact like we saw there, front wheel to back wheel, in a left hand or right hand corner like that. But in this situation, Gary's rear right to Ray's front left, that contact can stop the front end of Gary's car from turning around the corner, because if it's going to pivot, so to speak, the car is going to pivot, the rear end has to move out a little bit, but it can't because there's a wheel there touching it. So it kind of makes the car continue to go straight a fraction. So that was something else that the stewards sort of noticed and sort of took into account. But again, it came down to, the initial contact is from SRI's car into Gary's car. The second contact again is SRI's car into Gary's car. Gary's in control of his car, doing everything we'd expect him to do, and trying to leave space on the exit of the corner, and is massively unfortunate for SRI. And to be fair, when it was explained to SRI, he fully understood it on that one, which is why it can be very handy to for us to go through the detail like we have in this. Okay, so I think that was near enough the last one, or is it? Because we've got Gee Whiz Race 2. Hey, there's room over here. Okay, so this was something that happened lap 18 in the Suzuka race, and we're going to look at it for a couple of reasons. But I'll get to that in a sec. So Demon R, SRI, Demon R making a move on Hay, just ahead of SRI, and SRI having a cheeky look up the inside, but Hay's on the outside. To be honest, what looks like really good driving. I know I personally made a comment at the time to SRI, I said, sorry Ray, if I touched you there, I was avoiding Hay. Hay may have taken it in the wrong way. Hay did nothing wrong here. I caught him quicker than I expected, and I made a move which we'll see was very, very risky. So me and Ray are battling here fine. We go side by side through the corner, and that's the move where I was a little quicker than Hay, and to be honest, I didn't look when I moved over to the right. I just moved. Now luckily for me, the gap was there and I didn't make contact with Ray. Had I made contact with Ray, that would have been 100% my fault. Ray's taken a little bit of evasive and backed out of attempting to make a move there, which I've got to say, fair play to him, respect to him on that one, because it would have been very easy to be frustrated or just go for it. But I believe that Ray realised, or SRI realised, that there was two cars on his left, and if he was going to make that move up the inside, it's a risky one. So yeah, fair play to him. And I mean, I'll say I apologise, guys, because although it may look good on the footage, I took evasive, not knowing if there was a gap there or not. And proof of that was me at the time saying, sorry if I hit you there, Ray, I was taking evasive of Hay. And if Ray had have said, yes, you hit me, you put me off the track, I'd have waited for him, no problem. Well, if I believed him, I'd have waited for him. But there wasn't contact, so does that mean it becomes a what a move? A double overtake? Or was it an overtake on Ray? Because I think I was already ahead of him. Or was I? I can't remember. But yeah, so apologies to Hay. I wasn't saying you were slow. I just caught you faster than I expected. But there we go. Okay, so that's the G10 video, just about complete. As I mentioned, there's going to be a G11, G12 and G13 video. I'm not exactly sure when I'm going to be putting them out. Usually we'd put a G-Spot video out on a Monday, but I'm going to be trying to get these out as quickly as possible. So don't hold me to a day as to when these will come out. They'll probably come out in successive days or something like that. Okay, right, that's the end of this G-Spot. If you've got anything that you want to get us to look into, feel free to send a message to the page or comment on the video. That's not a problem to do that. Also, drivers, don't forget, if you do brilliant overtakes that we don't fully see on the footage, let us know and we can have a look at those as well. Right, have a good one, everybody, and we'll see you on the next G-Spot.